Welcome to the Growlers and Gremlins podcast, an alcoholic adventure in cryptids, paranormal, and the occult. Coming to you weekly from the heartland of America.
Welcome to Growlers and Gremlins. I'm John, and with me this week I have...
Brian. I'm back for yet another episode.
And also...
Jason, the analyst and favorite host.
And our first female guest...
Alicia.
All right. So this week, our beer of the week is Busted Knuckle from Quaff On Brewing Company. It's a robust porter. Pop this open.
John struggling with the
Gotta
cap.
really put a whole hand on that bottle opener.
Oh, it's foaming.
You dumbass.
It's Brian. Every time he opens a beer in a bottle, it foams up on him. I don't know why.
Everything's revolting. Doesn't want to be in him. It's a good initial taste, but kind of an acidic aftertaste.
Well,
It tastes like a porter to me.
yeah. Basic porter. Nothing super fancy about it.
That's what I like about porters is there's nothing so strong in them. They're just hard to complain about because there's just like, it's not really bitter, it's not too sweet, they're just beer.
Brian's apparently trying to chug his during the intro.
Yep.
Oh yeah. All right, Brian has already finished his beer.
I got Taxman on the wings.
Not supposed to talk about the secret beers. That's not part of this.
And now, because he chugged it, he's going to be belching the entire episode.
Probably.
Maybe. I'll put it right into your ears.
Okay. Okay, so
what's the topic this week, John?
that's loud. Topic this week is interesting thing that I knew of this years ago, and I always thought it was interesting, and then somebody recently brought it up again, and I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that, and I started looking back into it, and it all started in 2001 when the artist Venetian Snares released a song called All the Children Are Dead. And in the song, he does like electronic music, kind of it's weird, but the song has this audio that he sampled in there, and it's just this creepy story, and you only get bits and pieces of it. Well, this audio that he used in the song actually came from a phone call to a radio program, which was Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, which, if you're familiar with it, some listeners may not be. Coast to Coast AM is a national radio show that is on from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m.? 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. Broadcast nationally. And they just talk about strange things. They'll have, people talking about paranormal experiences they've had. They've got people talking about cryptids. Or they'll have some kind of weird, like, pseudoscience doctor of, crystal powers, come on. It's just weird stuff. They'll have different subjects going on. It's like our show.
It's a better version of us. Then, right?
Yes. It was hosted by a guy, Art Bell, for a long time. And then now it's hosted by George Norrie.
It's still going?
Oh, yeah. It's still going.
Okay.
George Norrie's still hosting it. George Norrie's been hosting it now for probably over 20 years. And it's still going nationally every night. And but anyway, he took the audio from a phone call that came into the Coast to Coast show I couldn't find the exact date on when this episode aired, because only one person seems to have actually bothered to save this clip, and it had to have been sometime in the mid-90s. Basically, a man from Ohio calls in, and he tells this story to the host. It all began when my grandfather was preparing to pass away back in 1990. He was living in an old folks' home and had cancer that had pretty much eaten away at his whole body. Most of the things that he said, people pretty much took as just erratic ramblings. During his last month or so, I spent a lot of time with him. He used to be the chief of police in the small farm town that I live in. When I say small, I mean really small. He was telling me about an incident. He would lay on his bed and say, "All the children are dead."
That's a cheery disposition.
Yeah. He looked at me and he said, "Do you believe in monsters? Do you believe in demons?" And I just thought, well, he's probably getting ready to pass over and he's scared. He's questioning his own mortality. He's wondering where he's going from here. And then he began a story that began in 1966, when in the small town that I live in, there were 74 children murdered over a summer. So, build up, this guy, he calls into the radio show, telling about, how he heard this story from his grandpa. So, now we'll get into it. Okay, so he continues on the radio interview. At first, they were missing, I guess you would say. It would be wrong to say they were murdered immediately. They went missing, one right after another. It soon got to the point that parents were not letting their children go out to play at night. It was in ranging ages from probably 6 or 7 to high school. Parents began keeping their children home from school, and my grandfather was the chief of police at the time. There were 2 kids who had went out to an old hydraulic plant that we have on the outskirts of our village. I guess they were going out there to play around and just be silly and get into things. They broke the lock on the old hydraulic plant and they went in. I guess it was just a matter of exploration. It had been closed down since the early 1900s. Well, they went in there, and in the combine pits, they discovered mutilated corpses floating in on the river. Dozens upon dozens. And of course they ran out and they ran to the police station. The chief thought it was a prank, so he sent his deputy down there, and he went in. He went into one of the rooms. It's just a cylindrical room that has a big pit in the middle. Inside the pit, there was just bodies on top of bodies covering the ground. He had his gun out because he heard footsteps in there. He was terrified and he was listening, and he could hear whispers and giggling and things such as that. He saw a movement like a mole, burrowing beneath the ground, beneath the corpses. The deputy decided to be smart and pretended to leave, closing the door behind him, but stayed inside. He knelt down in the darkness with his flashlight in one hand and his gun in the other. That's when he heard the footsteps coming up the little ladder out of the pit. Immediately, when he saw the silhouette appear over the edge, he turned on his flashlight, shining the light into the perpetrator's face, and found it to be his own teenage son. He was sporting a weapon which we commonly know as a hay knife. He told his son, "Put down the weapon, you don't understand what you're doing." His son attacked him, and the deputy was forced to shoot him. Any thoughts there?
I mean, it just happened to be that one random deputy. It was that deputy's son.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that seems a little too good a coincidence.
Right?
But then again, I guess it's kind of like the preacher's daughter, right? Whoever, they rebel against, the role of their father.
Mm-hmm.
But
so that's not the end of it.
I was about to say, that doesn't sound like the end of it. Because if that was the end of it, that's just a shitty story.
So the caller goes on. He says, "What came about next was a huge cover-up. The town was completely left in the dark. All the children are dead. Later on, the deputy couldn't handle it and went into the woods and shot himself. His wife, Mary, ended up secluding herself in her house with her children, swearing her family was possessed by some evil. She drew crucifixes all over the walls and refused to leave her home. In a turn of events, what had happened, what I came to find out through my grandfather, the boy had not been the killer. In an effort to avoid exposure for his own acts, the deputy was forced to kill his own son. His son had followed him to the plant and had attacked him out of fear." So, supposedly,
so neither of them were the killer?
the deputy was the killer, supposedly. But his son followed him out to the plant one night and saw all the bodies and what he'd been doing and was scared that he was in danger and attacked him. And so the deputy killed him to cover himself up so that no one would find out.
Didn't kill him very well if he was, hanging out in the pit.
But that's what the caller's grandfather, who was the chief of police, that's what he came to believe after the deputy killed himself, that it was out of guilt. And
what, for killing his own son?
Well,
not
for
the 63
killing
kids,
all the 74 kids,
whatever.
But it's just such a weird story. It's so out there and it's so creepy. And like, it's just that one phone call, and then Venetian Snares used it in the song. Other than that, there is nothing out there about this story. There's nothing about 74 children going missing or being murdered. There's just nothing. And it's either it didn't happen at all, the caller completely made it up, or, as he said, a huge cover-up followed it. And so maybe it did happen.
So I'm assuming there's a cover-up because we're only at 12 minutes and this is supposed to be a 45-minute podcast.
We are on a journey.
Okay.
We're on a journey to nowhere.
Where was there a location of this, or?
He said a small farm town in Ohio.
No, it doesn't matter how small farm town. There's too many big cities.
A lot of weird things happen in Ohio.
Listen.
You wouldn't.
This is the journey we're on, Brian.
73 kids missing.
This is the journey we're on. Let me explain.
You do have to remember that 73 is not a small
74.
74 is not a small number. That is half of our graduating class.
I can explain.
In one town.
That's more than my graduating class.
Brian. But this was of ranging age. They weren't all the same.
Yeah, but it's still 74 kids from a town.
So I was determined to find out if this happened. Where would it have happened? How would it have happened? Who would have done it? What's the cover-up? What's the story here? Where did this go? So, I only had a few things to go on. That this was a small farm town in Ohio. This town, which I left this part out in the call, but he mentioned that the town had 7 churches. He also mentioned what he called an old hydraulic plant that was on a river. So I start looking at different small towns in Ohio, trying to find something that, maybe has some weird missing persons stuff
and river access,
any kind of stuff going on in that time period. Well, so the main thing I had to look for was, what is a hydraulic plant? Well, I think the caller just meant to say hydroelectric plant and said hydraulic, because why?
That's a huge jump.
It's not.
Didn't he say the harvester pits?
The river ran through the plant. The kids were inside the plant and saw bodies on the river, coming in to the building. So most likely it's a hydroelectric plant, and the caller's probably not really caring to make the distinction, because a hydraulic plant isn't a thing.
In the way they call the old textile mills that had a water wheel.
That's a hydroelectric plant.
No,
where you're creating hydroelectricity.
No, because
it's a textile mill.
Yeah,
you're building fabric.
Yeah, old manufacturing plants.
So why would you call a textile mill a hydraulic plant?
Because it has a water wheel
that powers everything.
And then
inside.
there's belts running from the wheel to all the different machines.
Either way,
making it a hydraulically powered.
Whether the word is hydraulic or hydroelectric.
John, let's go back. What did he call the pit? The harvester pit?
He called it the combine pit.
The combine pit.
And I Googled that and cannot find any kind of industrial thing that's called a combine pit. But like I said, this is a story he's remembering relayed to him through his grandfather. So I imagine that some things are not going to be perfect. He said that he would get the details sporadically, like when his grandfather was, able to talk about things and was all there, and he had to piece it all together.
What it sounds like is he's leaving himself room to be wrong as he makes up a story.
It could be. But that's why I wanted to find out if it's true. How could it possibly have happened? So, anyway, regardless of whether it's hydraulic or hydroelectric for the plant, this would be some kind of plant that is on a river. So I started looking for...
I was gonna say, that could be just about any plant at turn of the century.
I started
a
looking...
lot of plants were on the rivers.
I started looking specifically for closed down plants on the river in Ohio.
Like all the ones along the Ohio River.
There are not a lot that are closed down.
I can't be surprised.
There were two main ones that I found. One was closed down like a long time ago. It's basically nothing but ruins at this point.
Okay.
There's another that was closed down in 1950 something, but is now active again. But during the time of this story would have been a closed down plant.
Okay.
That plant was in the Cuyahoga River Valley. It is right by Cuyahoga Falls, Boston, Peninsula, Ohio. It's a dam hydroelectric plant thing. It's right in the middle of what's known as Helltown, Ohio. So, yeah. So I'm looking at all of these different places, trying to figure out where this could be. And then I find out that, I found this hydroelectric dam that was shut down during the time of this story and is in an area known locally as Helltown. So I had to look into that. Why is this Helltown? Maybe something horrible happened. Well, Helltown, Ohio was, what's known now as Helltown, Ohio, was originally 3 small towns in the Cuyahoga Valley. In 1975, the federal government used eminent domain to buy all of the land, all of the houses in that area, and forced everyone to move out. It was done quickly. People in the town were fighting it and protesting it. They did not want to move, but the federal government decided this was going to be a national park, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. They did this in 1975, made everybody move out of the town in a rush, but didn't actually designate it a national park until the year 2000. They forced everyone out in a rush and waited 25 years to actually do anything.
Well, that is the speed of government, so...
That is the speed of government, but the other things surrounding Helltown, the reason it's called Helltown isn't because it was evacuated. It's the speculation as to why. There are a lot of urban legends in that area about what led to this evacuation of the town. One of the things was that there is a dump there that it's called like the Creshy dump or something, and that actually in the 80s the government took possession of that and found a bunch of toxic materials in it and stuff. So given that they, one of the theories is that there was toxic waste in this dump, and so they had to evacuate the town, but they didn't actually find out about the toxic waste in the dump until the 80s. But there's a lot of strange things about the area. The Cuyahoga Valley was home to 10 different Native American tribes during the course of history, and one of which, the Lenape, believed that it was a very important religious and spiritual site for them, this valley. So some people believe that when everyone came in and settled it, that the Native Americans that were forced out cursed the land, and that just terrible things will always happen in this area. And that's one thing. Helltown's just kind of a creepy area. There's a lot of people you'll see on YouTube that go to visit it because they have the end of the road road.
What the fuck?
Where it's a road that right before you get into the area of Helltown, this road is closed. You're not supposed to drive on it. But as you drive up, the angle of the hill that you're about to cross is so steep that when you get to the top of the hill, you can't see any road over the hood of your car.
Oh.
So they call it End of the World Road. But once you go down the hill, you enter Helltown, where all you have is this whole section of Cuyahoga Valley National Park where there's just all these houses that people used to live in that are just completely abandoned. A lot of them were burned down. And it's just an eerie, creepy feel. There's a barn that has a noose hanging in it, and
so it looks like Chernobyl then.
Or Nuketown map,
yeah.
right?
So some of the other rumors are that there was, you know, some satanic cult in the area, that there was a serial killer. There is an old school bus off the side of one road that people believe that, so supposedly the school bus either crashed or there was an escape from a mental hospital, and these people came out and like charged this school bus and killed every kid on board.
Damn.
And I was thinking, well, every urban legend usually has like some little grain of truth to it, like something started this. So this school bus and this whole urban legend about, oh, you know, all these kids on this bus got murdered, or, you know, got me thinking like, well, maybe this is an urban legend resulting from a cover-up in which a lot of children were missing or killed, but we never got the real story. The number of children that can ride on a school bus at standard capacity, if you just put 2 kids per seat, is 72. We know that school buses never ride just 2 kids to a seat.
Oh, fuck no.
It is very likely that 74 kids could have fit on that bus.
That's hilarious.
And it would be the perfect explanation to explain away the death or disappearance of 74 children.
Yeah, but that's not like cover-up worthy.
No.
That's a tragedy.
Yeah, it's a tragedy.
But that's not a cover-up.
But people tend to not question tragedy so much. It's like, you know, if these people thought, oh, all these kids were lost in a bus crash or something happened to this bus, there's not as much like questioning as if like they know that somebody actually stole and killed 74 children. You know, people will accept it for a tragedy and move on.
But what motivation?
It's a perfect cover-up.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying it was going to be a tragedy if the bus flipped. I mean, if somebody got on and just killed kids, that's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Like, that's an escaped person.
Absolutely.
But what motivation is there to cover up this? Because, I mean, we think about other serial killers that we know about.
This was a very small town. And he says, even in there, when I say small, I mean very small.
Well, it's not like they're just going to forget that those kids existed.
Well, he called him the chief of police of the town. But, you know, my guess would be in a small town, he was probably like the only actual police officer. You know, super, super small town. He may have just been like the sheriff of the town, and there weren't really any other cops because the population was low enough that he could handle it. Most people knew each other, things like that. But the whole idea between why they covered it up was just so that the people of the town would just kind of not revolt and like go after the police department because it was this deputy's son that did all of it, or it was the deputy that did all of it. They didn't want the truth being known, and supposedly his grandpa was regretting this on his deathbed and wanted to get the truth out. All the children are dead, because supposedly they never told the people of the town that the children were found and dead. They just always believed they were missing. Yeah.
You'd think after a couple months they'd be like, yeah, that kid's probably dead.
Yeah.
Well, there's been children missing longer than that.
Oh yeah, I looked at a lot of missing persons reports, like in the process of trying to figure this out, because I was looking at all of the children that have gone missing in Ohio that have been reported, and there's kids in Ohio that have been missing for 40 years.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, usually if a kid is kidnapped and you don't see them for 3 months, you can probably assume they're dead.
Yeah.
Or they could have just ran away from home.
But the interesting thing is just that
too.
Something has to have happened in this area for it to gain the reputation of being Helltown.
I mean, sure.
And this is multiple towns that they call the whole area Helltown. And
well, you said it's a valley.
Don't go there. It's a big valley.
Yeah, it's a big valley. So it's all the cities in the stretch of this valley.
Basically.
So it's like, yeah, you can have a lot of bad stuff that goes on in that.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about Tennessee, late 18, early 1900s. There was a lot of shit. It's like you had a town, and then it was like, well, 3 miles away, there's another 10 houses.
Mm-hmm.
We'll encompass this whole big, like, area, and that'll be our town. It's going to be a like, what, 800 square mile area? And it's like, yeah, we got like 8 towns with us, and we're all just this one little conglomerate.
Yes, this is a pretty small area overall. I don't think it's really... It's nowhere near like 80 square miles or anything, because like Cuyahoga Valley National Park is not all that big, and these 3 towns didn't even encompass the entirety of that area. But I got thinking about it, and I was like, okay, if this story happened at all, Helltown is the most likely place for it to have happened because of, unexplained things, urban legends all throughout that town, the weird possession, the weird thing with the federal government taking possession of the land to make it a national park 25 years later, rushing everyone out, and it has the plant on the river.
Okay, so you had mentioned a possible curse. Did you look up what deity was supposedly there for the indigenous people?
I am not familiar with their deities, so it was just general, because like there's not a lot of specifics on the Native American tribes of that area. The only way I was even able to find the information about that was through the history of Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Is that, this land was originally held by indigenous peoples who found it as a religious site. And that's where the urban legend of this was cursed by Native Americans came from. But I got thinking...
there's things that they believe in, things like Wendigos or...
Yes. Now,
if we get supernatural with this...
Now, we want to go Wendigos. Helltown, Ohio. If you're familiar with the Travel Channel Shock Docs...
Nope.
They make these documentaries that are mix of truth and fiction that are just fun to watch. They made a documentary about Helltown, Ohio, just called Helltown, where they took all of the urban legends and portrayed them as if they were true, and added a bunch of stuff. So
I have seen those.
Yeah,
those
so
are
they
cool.
added this whole thing about like the cult of W living in this town, and there were these people that were like, they knew there was a Wendigo in the forest, and they would like make sacrifices to it and like leave goats out there.
Goats.
But I mean, it was all... they're just taking urban legends and like trying to put truth to them.
Well, I'm just saying a large supernatural component could explain why it would have been quarantined off.
It could be.
You might just say that it is, I'm not saying SCP, but some, government entity that polices supernatural
so you're talking about the Global Occult Coalition.
It was very weird too that when the federal government did take all of this land and all these homes, they burned a ton of these homes down, but not as in the way that you would do it if you were clearing an area.
You mean they just firebombed them instead of control fired?
They would have like a street full of houses. They'd burn down like 3 of them that aren't even next to each other. It was just like specific houses were chosen to be burned for who knows what reasons.
Sounds like we gotta make the right little signet.
Like, in a way, this is kind of a Helltown, Ohio episode, because there's so much in that area that we could just go on and on about it for a long time, because there's just so many rumors as to why it was evacuated. There was some kind of satanic cult. There was a serial killer on the loose that they like needed to catch. There was Native American curses. There was toxic waste coming from the dump and mutating creatures in the woods. Like, there's all kinds of weird stuff around this area.
Now I'm just picturing the Toxic Avenger.
Yeah.
In a tutu running around town.
I felt you think that.
Hey, I love trauma films. Yeah. I can't help it.
But anyway, so I thought, okay, if the story happened at all, this has got to be the place. Too many things fit. All the urban legends, especially an urban legend where a school bus full of kids gets killed. That's pretty right there with the numbers we would need. So then I got thinking, well, somebody has to have done it. somebody had to be the killer.
I mean, did they really? I mean, if it is something supernatural, then it could have been the supernatural entity that did it, or possessing somebody to make them look like they're doing it.
It could be. But he said in the story that a cover-up ensued. I believe that the killer of all of those children in his story was not killed. I got looking into it, and I thought, well, somebody who did this, if they lived on after this point, they had to have killed again. There has to be somebody out there who these crimes could be attributed to. So that's where we get to Robert Burdella. Robert Burdella is known as the Kansas City Butcher, or the Collector. Robert Burdella was arrested in the 80s for a series of killings where he would take young men and kill them in horrible ways. He'd torture them, rape them, and then afterwards he'd dissect their bodies and just like really,
Wow, any relation to Brian?
Yeah. He even referred, when he was pleading guilty, to his fantasy, or to his murders, as all of his darkest fantasies coming to life. And he had no remorse about what he did. And this was in Kansas City. And sure enough, Robert Burdella was born in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, in 1949. At the age of, he would have been...
At the age of 0.
He would have been 17 when these murders happened. He was the son of Robert Burdella Sr. and Mary Burdella. The killer's mother's name in the story from the call was Mary. Robert Burdella came from a devoutly Catholic family. The killer in the story's mother, Mary, was drawing crucifixes all over the walls and was afraid that she was cursed by some demon.
How many other kids did she have?
She had one other son that I know of. And Robert Burdella was the oldest. He had a younger brother. We'll get into this here. Because I think if this happened, Robert Burdella is the killer. So, his dad... We don't know a lot, because most of the time when you get information about a serial killer, it's all about their life, because a lot of the times their parents are nobodies. There's not a Wikipedia article about their parents. But Robert Riddell was born in 1949. He was the first child of Robert Sr. and Mary. It's very likely that this was part of the baby boom post-World War II. It's likely that his father fought in World War II. We don't know for sure, but it's possible. Well, in a very, very small town, sometimes a deputy could just be a fellow citizen of the town who, if you got a World War II vet in town who's pretty well known and respected in town, why not deputize him, have him help you out, especially if it's a town so small that, you know, you don't have a lot of crime. And like in the story, his grandfather thought it was a joke, so he just sent a deputy. Well, Robert Burdella grew up, you know, the oldest of two sons, and he was overweight. He was not good at sports, and he found out later he was gay, and so his dad was not too fond of him. His younger brother was very athletic, played a lot of sports, so the dad really liked the younger brother, so Robert Burdella always resented his father. They didn't have a great relationship, and his father was also abusive. So Robert Burdella said that what inspired him to kill in the first place was the movie The Collector that he saw when it was released in 1965. The Murders in Our Story, 1966. A time when Robert Burdella is living in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, which is right in this Cuyahoga Valley, where I believe if the story happened, it would have happened. So, what I think happened is he saw this movie and he wanted to do things. So he started collecting. He started just stealing kids from town because he could. You know, he was 17 years old. He could go and take a kid. And he was killing them, dissecting them, whatever, and just putting them in this pit. Well, I think that he would have taken them, you know, dissected them, whatever, put them in this pit. And the way that it's described in the story of him burrowing in the bodies like a mole, just squirming around in there, like he's really into it, you know? And
just
even
gotta get a feel for it all over my body.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that like his first known victim was in the 80s in Kansas City. But he is on record as saying at one point that he was reminded of when he was young, when he saw the collector, and the feelings it gave him, and the feelings he got after his first victim. That is what inspired him to kill again. But there is no confessions to any earlier killings. So it's possible that when he was young, after seeing the collector, as a teenager, he decided to go try it out, have himself a good time. I think that his father, deputized by the local sheriff, came out there and found him. But what I think happened is that they had this awful relationship. He was abusive to his son, and I think in that moment he had like a revelation of, I have created this monster. I did this. And, you know, I think the father kind of saw it as his own fault when he found his son killing all of these children and all of this. So what I think happened is that he let him go. And then told the sheriff that he killed him. In 1967, Robert Burdella moved to Kansas City. The father died of a heart attack, from what we know. But what I think happened, as in the story, he killed himself. But not because he killed these kids, but because he knew what his son was, and he couldn't help living with that he let that out into the world, that he didn't do something, that he just sent him away to Kansas City.
See, what he should have done was train him to be a serial killer that hunted other serial killers.
Yeah.
Jesus fucking
That'd be
Christ.
pretty cool.
Oh my god, it's Dexter.
Yeah,
Is that
that's the plot of
Dexter?
Dexter.
I don't watch Dexter. I didn't like it. I watched like episode 1 and it was really bad.
Like, what is it, the first 3 seasons, and then it all turns to shit?
But I think that
A pivotal character dies, and then after that, it just falls apart.
I think that through the course of this, I found a possible solution for an old mystery, an internet mystery that nobody has bothered to really look into. Because like a lot of people know that song, but not a lot of people know that that audio came from a real phone call.
Hey, John.
Yeah?
I don't know anything about that song.
No, I said a lot of people. I'm not saying all people know the song.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of
Hey,
people,
John.
like if you get looking online,
I don't know the song either.
that's okay. If you get looking online,
Alicia, do you know the song?
she's heard it.
Yes, but only because
of
John
this.
made you listen to it
he's played it.
a lot.
It's creepy because what he did in the song is he took the audio from the phone call and he like slowed it down and lowered the pitch to be like, it's so suspenseful and creepy because he's like, the audio in the song is like, he saw movement burrowing like a mole in the corpses. Like it's it's really like creepy sounding, but like in the actual call the guy just sounds like a regular dude. But
It was Carl in the
it was
gore
just,
pit.
I don't know. I just thought it was strange that there was so little out there about the story because it's such a weird story. It was used in a song by a fairly well-known artist, and nobody's bothering to ask anywhere like, hey, is there any validity to this story? I had to dig and dig to find anything to connect to it because it's like, sure, the story may be completely made up, but is nobody even bothering to ask? You know, I couldn't find any forums anywhere where anyone had asked about it. And so I just think, you know, if there's anyone out there that has heard the song, knows of the audio, and has wondered, hey, what could this be? Well, here's a possible solution. I spent a lot of time digging into everything I could trying to find this. I mean, I was looking at the, thanks to Jason, I was looking at the numbers of school registrations in those years in the Cuyahoga Valley area. I mean, it was weird, and it's hard to tell because small towns tend to grow. But
I remember you showing it to me at work, and it just had a steep drop off.
It's steep drop off in growth.
Right.
Cuyahoga Falls grew significantly less compared to the other towns in that time. So it could be that less people moved there, or it could be that they lost a lot of children, but also new children came into school, but it offset the growth, that loss of 74, because school numbers were not high back then. So, I mean, there's just a lot there that lines up that it's possible that this happened. And if it possibly happened, we possibly know where, and we maybe know who did it. It's just, I don't know, it freaked me out. It gave me goosebumps when I'm trying to figure out who could have done it, and it all just lined up so much with Robert Burdella's life, a known serial killer. It's just crazy to me, because he's always known as like a Kansas City serial killer, because that's where he did it, but he grew up in Cuyahoga Falls. What y'all think?
Well, I think you're no one special, so for you to have solved something no one else has seems very implausible.
It's weird to me that no one else is looking at it. That's the only problem, is I feel like I'm the only person who bothered to look at it.
Well, and that's why it seems weird, because no one else has.
Yeah, no one has taken it.
It was just a story on Coast to Coast, and like what you said, it seems right. All that stuff lines up, for the most part, and kind of makes sense. But because, it wasn't in the news, or, there's no other stories or, witnesses from, that.
Yeah, no reports, nothing. I don't care how small town
they
you
would
are.
smell those bodies.
No, it's not even the smell.
Well,
like
it was out on the outskirts of the town, away from it. I mean, this plant where I think it happened is just like out in the middle of the woods on the river.
Yeah.
There's not anything really around it.
For me, it's always going to come back to 74. I don't care how small town you are. You get that many missing person reports, or like confirmed kills or anything in an area that small,
unless your police chief is covering it up and is telling people that he is reporting this to the feds, but isn't.
No, the cover up would have been after the 74 had already gone missing, because at the end of the story is that going away. By the time you had 30 kids missing, you would have outside investigators, you would have search parties, you would have all kinds of shit going looking for these kids.
Only if they're told.
What, you think all the parents whose kids are just missing?
I think that they told their local police department, and their local police department probably told them, they handled it, they're reporting it to the proper authauthorities. This happened in a short period of time.
It seems unlikely that many parents would just be like, okay.
Yeah, you said 74 in a short period of time. It's like, oh man, little Sarah went missing today. Oh man, who else got? Oh, it was Clarence. He's gone too, and everybody's just like, man, that's like 60 now. Man, those feds they're taking their sweet time. It's been like 2 months since the first one. I think in the days
before like constant television watching and 24-hour news cycles and pre-cell phone, I don't think that a lot of the local people in this tiny town would have been thinking about the feds. I think that most of your law enforcement was relied on your local police department. If someone went missing, that's where you went. Yeah,
that's where you would go to start. But when all the families started getting together and going, this isn't working, we have to get somebody. But everybody, they wouldn't have called for the feds. They would have called for the army.
At what time period, or at what time would they decide this isn't working? Because if it's over the course of a summer, it's likely only 2 months
90
start
days,
to finish.
John. And 74 kids in 90 days, roughly.
Yeah, well, 90 days is 3 months, but...
You said it was over a summer.
Yeah, I said 2 months, and then you were like, that's 90 days.
You said it was over the summer. That's roughly 90 days.
Okay. Brian is not
that's
here
a
for
kid
math.
A day. Mm-hmm. It's like by the end of that first month, you have 30, maybe 30 families, if they're all single families.
Like I'm saying, there are some flaws. It could be a completely made-up story. But if it isn't, here's a possibility of how it happened. cover up with a school bus crash or, a bunch of kids murdered on a bus. And who knows?
So my problem is the federal government doesn't come in and cover up serial killers. We find out about them.
Then that's the thing, is I don't believe the federal government was involved in the events in this town.
But they took the land and
10 years later.
Yes.
Or 9 years later.
Yeah, why? I mean,
that's the thing. That's why there's so many urban legends. Why would they want to cover up this area? That's why I'm or just clear it out, get people out of it.
Yeah, but that's why I'm kind of like, what if there is a supernatural component to this?
There could be.
Because the first thing that comes to my mind is Stephen King's It.
Mm-hmm.
Where a malevolent force makes people not look into the disappearing children.
That could be.
You seem to be struggling to remember it.
Even in this case, a malevolent force could have used Robert Burdella to do this, because he was very vulnerable. He was not a happy kid.
Because in the story of It, none of the adults, they're all made to be oblivious to the disappearance of the children and to the general plights of the children.
Yeah.
Because like there's the one kid that had like a pig carved into his stomach for being a fat kid.
Yeah.
And all the adults overlooked it because of the malevolent force.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think Stephen King's It is a template for how supernatural things actually work? No. But if this was a cursed area, and they went through and randomly burned, 2-3 houses on each street, what were they trying to burn out?
Yeah.
So yes, your story makes sense until you get to the fact that the federal government took that land for some unknown reason.
And that's the thing, it could be that there was something going on there that the federal government knew about that the locals never did. And, that thing going on could have caused this whole thing. There could be some curse on the land or some evil spirit, some malevolent force that caused all of it. But I don't know. I mean, what the weirdest thing about it is, it's like the guy calls in, he tells this whole story, and it's like, what would be the motivation to just make that up?
Freak people out?
I mean, maybe, but like, it's weird because
create a tulpa.
Yeah, he created the killer, but I don't know, the whole thing. The story always just freaked me out. Mostly the idea of like a pit full of corpses and somebody like writhing around in that pit, just like
need to read more
enjoying their
Vietnam.
kills. And I don't know. It just always seemed weird to me. And as far as the federal government and like missing children, I think that a lot of children go missing without the federal government's awareness, because I was looking into it, and like from like 1960 to 1970, only like 3 children are reported to have gone missing in the entire state of Ohio. How likely is that in 10 years in an entire state, only 3 children went missing?
Well, that stuff doesn't get reported on a federal level. It's a state level.
It doesn't get reported on a federal level until it's believed to have crossed state lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it becomes a very noticeable pattern. Everything else is up to states.
Well, then your whole thing is that, like, why were the feds not involved?
No,
well, why would they be?
It wasn't feds.
It's a local issue.
It's a local issue. Up to 30 kids are gone.
But is there some kind of benchmark in there that the feds get involved?
I would assume a higher
this many
authority.
Kids, they get involved?
Yeah, it would probably be past 10.
Well, we don't know.
No,
well,
but
also we don't know how things were operating in the mid 60s either. We know how things are now.
The mid 60s, you mean with army recruiters in every town trying to get kids for Vietnam?
Technology was much lower. It's just.
It was low, but it was still there. It was the mid 60s. It wasn't 1922.
Yeah, but in the mid 60s, there are 2 different worlds in this country. Even now, there are different worlds in this country. If you're in a very, very small town, it is almost like going back a few years, because things get to these small towns a little later. So if this is an extremely rural small town in the 1960s, they were probably living like it was still like the 40s, You never know. Especially since we don't know exactly what town the story happened in. I just had to...
Yeah, well, even around here, there's small towns where There's no internet coming in. There's no cell service for whatever reason.
Yeah.
They're like, stepping into the past.
But
past, like stepping into the 90s, but still.
My opinion of the whole thing is that, yeah, most likely this didn't happen.
Oh, hell no, this didn't get reported. This Helltown area is 30 miles from Sandusky, Ohio. That's a major port hub for Ohio.
Okay.
So you're not going to be 30 miles away from that and hear, hey, these 60 kids went fucking missing, and
Brian,
not throw up flags.
Think about any other large city and go out 30 miles. You'll find very, very rural areas that are very disconnected and separate from that city.
That's Crawfordsville from
That's
Indianapolis.
one specific town. You're choosing a city. Look at all of the tiny little towns that are there. Think of Maplewood.
Darlington,
John,
Thorntown,
Maplewood is 20 miles from Indianapolis.
Yeah, I just looked it up. This area that you got, that's a big ass area with a bunch of towns in it that they conglomerated into one to cover this whole area.
But no, you're looking at the entire size of Cuyahoga Valley National Park.
Yes, but you're saying
the actual
this
towns that were evacuated was just like 2 or 3 really, really small towns.
Yeah, but you're
that
not
happen to be within that area.
Yeah, but still, that small of an area, 74 people missing or dead.
Yeah.
That's a good portion of a population that just disappeared. And nobody said nobody ever left town to go get anything or to visit anybody and say, yeah, my town's been experiencing a lot of disappearances.
You never know what this police chief was like.
What, did he
may
kill
have been
anybody?
the type that it was like, I will handle this. I am not going to, admit defeat and go to higher powers.
John, you're making this sound. This police department had 2 guys in it.
Anyway, in conclusion.
No, there is no conclusion.
My belief is that most likely the story never happened. The guy made it up.
Yeah.
But if it did, I think I found the answer. If it did happen, I think I found the way that it happened and where it happened.
I think for it to happen the way, to circumvent the issues that Brian points out of who ignores that many children going missing, there had to have been some sort of supernatural component to this.
And it could be that there was a supernatural component, if it's not made up. But I just really like the narrative I created, where you have like young Robert Burdella abused by his father, and this like moment of realization between the two of them as he realizes the monster he's created, and like it's a beautiful story that way. It's horrifying.
You should make a movie.
It's kind of
write a book.
It would be like
write
a
fucking anthology with all your stories for these scenarios that you just come to conclusions for.
Pseudo history about the relationship between a serial killer and his father, and like. I thought that was a beautiful story I created.
Also,
which may be true.
Why write a book when he has a podcast?
Everything I said is plausible.
Because people will buy a book.
Podcasts are free, though.
Yeah. But you can't explain it as easily or as
I'll write
nicely.
Someday, Brian. Someday.
It's not as concise.
I will
when
write
you're
a book.
Coming out of it, looking at your phone.
I've always wanted to.
Yeah,
but I can't.
Write an anthology about this. And about the rockets that go back in time by flying to a destination.
Well, no, I told you about
landing on top of each other.
I told you about my one book idea, though, right?
No,
I did. I told you about it. The one where like all of the men get drafted again and like basically put in an internment camp in China.
Yeah, okay.
And like the women like take back the country from like foreign invaders. Like. It is a good story.
Yeah,
I explained it to Brian in detail.
Yeah,
you could probably write a whole book about Brian and his mysterious scabbing.
My mysterious scabbing.
Yeah.
It's all scab.
Brian's really scabby.
It's very coarse.
What do you think?
I don't know. It's an interesting story. I don't know. It's hard to say if to really believe it, the story that the guy told on Coast to Coast, because
Coast to Coast is full of weirdos.
It is, and
sometimes
there's no other evidence of it, and that's what it's so hard to really want to believe.
I have there's a soft,
I need some sort of evidence.
There's a soft spot in my heart for Coast to Coast because
there is for me too. My dad used to always.
My dad got me into it too. We'd be on like a long road trip somewhere, and at night we'd listen to Coast to Coast while we're driving. But also,
your dad would be the AM radio guy.
Oh yeah,
who doesn't like AM radio? It's got the best stuff on it.
Coast to Coast gave me one of the strangest nights of my life.
Oh, is this the night where
the unexplainable night? at work.
Yeah, the one where you had to shut all the doors, even though it was like 90 degrees.
So weird because I'm listening to Coast to Coast, and they're talking about aliens, like different aliens, and this guy's talking about like there's like some kind of type of alien that like literally eats people, and then there's also aliens that'll bring positive experiences and things like that.
It's the probe. That's the positive experience.
He had a this guy that was on there talking about all these aliens said that like, you know, some people...
Is this about the dog?
No, some people have experiences about aliens a lot. This was the same night, though. We'll get there. This was the weirdest night of my life, hands down. Some people have a lot of experiences.
Should you use this now or make it a podcast episode?
Because this is about Coast to Coast.
All right.
He said some people have a lot of experiences with extraterrestrials and some people do not. Some people are happy that they do not and don't want any, but some people do want to experience something, to know that there is something out there. And he was talking about like this like mantra that he uses. It's just a noise that he would make. And he says that supposedly like that sound like draws these experiences to you. And I'm just sitting there in the middle of the night alone in this place. It's dark. I'm in a big truck shop and there's like all these doors open. And I was like, that's dumb. And I sit there and I start making the noise, you know? And the rest of the night, I just felt really paranoid. And I couldn't shake the feeling that like something weird was going on. Like I would see like trailers out on the lot in the dark. I'd see like animals dart under them and it would like make me jump a little bit. And I'm like, all right, whatever, you know, just a weird night listening to creepy stuff. I'm here alone. And then out of nowhere, this black sedan pulls up and pulls right to the door where I'm standing. And I'm like, what? Who could this be? A guy gets out in a suit and he says, have you seen a box truck around here? And I was like, well, I mean, we have 2 of them here. Like, can you be more specific? And he says, I'm looking for a blue budget truck, I believe maybe carrying radioactive materials. And I was like, what? No, there hasn't been a blue budget truck. And he's like, you mind if I take a quick look around? I was like, whatever. So he gets in his car, drives all around the lot, and then leaves. And I was like, that was weird. Like, nothing like that had ever happened.
It was the Men in Black.
Yeah, it was so weird. A black sedan pulls up, a guy in a suit gets out, and he asks me a question about a box truck carrying radioactive materials. I'm like, what the hell was that?
Hello,
you know?
good sir.
It was Will Smith.
That night, I closed all the doors, and I was just like, I am not dealing with what's outside. I'm not dealing with anything, you know? And I went home. And I was working nights, so I was sleeping during the day. And so I had blankets up over the windows and stuff so it would be dark. I went to sleep and I had this dream. And in this dream, I'm walking on like these weird dock things like through a swamp. It's just like a whole bunch of little boardwalks going through this swamp. And I'm looking for my dog. And I'm calling to her. And then I see her. And there's this other dog there, this little like yippy annoying dog. And I reach down to get my dog, and this dog jumps nose first into my butt. Like lodges its whole snout.
That's why you want to tell you want to share any story you can about something going in your butt. I know you've done this before.
Listen, this dog went whole snout in my butt. To the point in the dream, it hurt so bad that I was jumping in the air, kicking at this thing, trying to get it out of my butt, you know? The pain was so bad, it woke me up. I woke up thinking that something had just been, like, on my butt, you know?
In reality,
I wake up, it's middle of the day. All the lights are off. The blankets are still covered. My bedroom door is locked. No one has been in there. Nothing has happened. But just the dream itself would have been like, oh, that was weird. But that dream coming directly after that extremely weird night I had, it was like, oh.
In reality, it was just your wife and her strap-on.
This was
pre-marriage.
This was pre-marriage.
Oh.
This was it was just a weird experience. I was completely alone in that room. And I don't know, it was just like he said, you know, do this thing to bring alien experiences to you, extraterrestrials. And then the way the night went down after I made that noise, was like, maybe there's something to this.
And then you
Maybe
got
not
probed
everyone
by
that
a
calls this
dog.
show is crazy. Well, they say that with some experiences, like with aliens and stuff, your brain can't comprehend them, so it will just like supplement with like false memories that would make sense.
You
But
sicko.
it being so
You put
strange,
the dog in that place.
it being so strange that my brain, in order to make up for it, just came up with the weirdest possible thing that I could comprehend. Because even then, it was really strange. It's not like I had a dream that I went to the doctor and,
Got poked.
yeah, it was still so weird. So it was like maybe something happened and my brain could not make sense of it in any kind of logical way. That darn budget truck with the radioactive materials, man.
Right.
But yeah, that's about it. I just I like that little story I created. It might be true, might not be.
Well, on that note,
Have fun, everybody. That was stupid.